Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Steve Beaman, I love having him on. He's we're kind of like brothers with different mothers, or something like that, as my cooler friends would say, because we are a lot alike. You know, and some of these things, particularly when you get down to the language of America's origins, there's a lot of people out there that simply don't understand rule of law versus mob rule. We have all these romantic notions about democracy that our founding fathers found abhorrent, and you know, there's not many people who talk like you and I. We're pretty 18th century, buddy.
Well, indeed we are. In fact, I was talking again this morning to some young people explaining that there's a side of this, let's call it this society today, that doesn't like the freedoms that we enjoy, because we define freedom as political freedom, economic freedom, and individual liberty. And that is imbued in our Constitution, unique among all constitutions of the world. And as the world turns against that Constitution, it's harder and harder for us to sustain the individual liberties we've been granted by our forebears.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So I had a conversation with Blanche Lincoln. She has now been hired by some organization to speak out in defense of private contractors. And I said, when you know, this is a former U.S. senator from Arkansas. I said, when you were in the U.S. Senate, you know, you actually, I was actually said something to the effect, I'm shocked that they would have you involved with their organization, because Obamacare alone did incredible damage to private contractors, and we had to do something to contain costs. And I love what Thomas Sowell says, you know, and he does this nice little laundry list of the cost of health care, doctors, hospitals, testing, insurance companies, etc. Now, how does adding an extra layer called government somehow reduce the cost of health care? Well, there's only one way that's going to happen, and that is if they do decide to do death panels, which are the rule rather than the exception throughout Western Europe.
And I will suggest to you that will not reduce cost either. This whole notion that government can somehow go in and reduce costs is incredibly naive. And Blanche Lincoln reminds me of George McGovern, who, after his loss in the presidential candidate election, went out and ran a bed and breakfast. He was put out of business shortly thereafter by government regulation, and said, if I had known in Washington what I now know about government, I would have voted very differently.
Yep.
The fact is, these people don't understand the private sector. They don't understand how important competition is in the marketplace. And it's comments like that naive thought, well, we'll help to control costs. No, they won't. They're just going to force costs into different areas, and it will hit those who can least afford to be hit.
Yeah. The biggest beneficiary of these changes will be government itself. Let's just face it.
That's exactly right.
In fact, really,
will grow and the poor people will pay for it.
That's exactly right. No question about it. And in fact, George McGovern, that article in the Wall Street Journal, what an incredible article. I remember when it came out, it was actually shocking. And he said, you know what? In fact, going forward, they should make a prerequisite before anyone be elected to any office is that they should have to pay payroll, that they should have to be subject to government regulations, because until they've done those things, they have no idea what they're doing in a legislative body.
Well, and it certainly was the intent of our framers with the whole concept of citizen politicians. You come out of the private world, you spend your time as a public servant in Washington, and you come back and live under the laws you made. Well, we've transitioned that into some rock star thing where we have people like Dick Durbin out of Illinois who spend a career in Washington. They ingratiate themselves and their families with money at our cost, and they don't know what they do. All they do is pass laws that emotionally sound good.
Yep, that's exactly right. So I kind of controlled the discussion today with my own little hot buttons. What are some other things you've seen that caught your attention last week?
Well, first, I'm always glad to have you control it. It is, after all, your radio program.
Oh, that's true. Right? I forget when you're on. But anyway, go ahead. No.
The big thing that I really was watching last week is the Fed, and you've got a couple of dynamics there. First, they are backing off on their stimulus package, or at least talking about it. That caused the markets to come down, both the stock and the commodities markets, as bond prices shot up with the thought that interest rates are going up. So you've got kind of a thing going on at the Fed where there's concern they're going to cause interest rates to move, but there's a lot of talk now that Bernanke is on his last legs and will be replaced coming up with somebody like maybe Larry Summers, who's really, no, he's not a bad guy, but I wouldn't consider him a friend of the strong dollar people.
Yeah, isn't he one of the geniuses that helped Japan during their financial crisis back in the 1990s? That
yes,
they've never recovered from his help. I don't think they've never recovered from his help.
No, and you got folks also like Alan Blinder who are being discussed. He worked with Greenspan, but most of these are soft money people, so they're not going to be like Volcker who came in and said we need to support the dollar. They're going to continue the policy of flooding the world markets with currency to stimulate it, even though it's been proven that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I think we could easily find ourselves below 10,000 mark this week again. Do you think?
Now, I'd be cautious on making short-term market forecasts. I think there's a lot to digest still. Corporate earnings are pretty good. Right now, the market is trading at about a multiple of 20 times earnings. That's not historically high or low. The high, let's say multiples get up into the 30, 35 range, the lows down into the 7 to 10 range. So we're kind of in the middle valuations. I don't see anything absent another catalyst for the market to really move. I think we're in a secular bear, but I think you got to watch the Fed. If they really do pull the lid off, rates could pop up, and that will be terrible for the U.S. stock market.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking again to Steve Beaman. He's with the Society for the Advancement of Financial Education. I find the quickest way to get there is through stevebeamangroup.org. That's stevebeamangroup.org. Want to encourage you to check it out. And, yeah, it's an interesting thought, interesting time. We got him coming, by the way, in August. He's going to be over at, for sure, at the Sugarland Tea Party, also looking at the Pachyderm Club, which may end up being a couple of weeks apart. So you might be spending a lot of time in Texas late summer or early fall. Plus, we got a couple of chambers of commerce that are working on having him come as well. We're going to be seeing a lot of Steve Beaman in the months to come.
Well, that's always our pleasure, Kevin. As you know, I'll speak anywhere, anytime when people will listen to financial and economic freedom. Yeah,
absolutely. Steve Beaman, he's again with the Society. He's a great contributor here on this program. And I want to encourage you to learn more by checking out the Steve Beaman Group, stevebeamangroup.org. Thanks so much for being with us, my friend.
Always my pleasure. And again, I'm sorry I had to be on cell phone today. I just couldn't get our technologies worked out to give your audience a better sound quality.
Well, you do a great job every week, including today. Thanks for being with us. All right. When we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you the best content here, including a great article by Steve Beaman on children's finance at usdailyreview.com.